my tarot friends, Justin and Michael, welcome back to my channel, and welcome, of course, if it's your first time visiting. I appreciate you as always. Hopping on today to do this very long overdue video on some new Tarot de Marseille decks that I've gotten in my collection. Most of which are printed by the illustrious Marco Benedetti, who needs no introduction. Marco's been on the channel before, and if you're interested, I'll link some discussions we've had, both with myself and Marco, and also one video we did with Sherryl Smith on historic Italian tarot. I'll link them below, but he's also pretty well known in the tarot history Facebook group circuit. The great thing about Marco is, besides his unadulterated opinions, and he's not easily influenced by anybody. Now, in a very lovable way, but there's no shortage of opinions from Marco. But he's also known because, to collectors, people who are interested in historic tarot. And for instance, a deck like Jean Payen, there's not this huge demand for a Payen, and you're not going to see it on Kickstarter. So Marco will do print runs of like 20 and 50, to accommodate friends of his in the community, really. So, and everything he does, or most of the things he does, is like either handmade completely or containing handmade boxes, all hand cut. He has done some sort of mass produced quality decks, but special runs, like for instance this Minchiate he printed is on like factory board and so forth, and it's really well done, but still has like a handmade quality to it. But things like that, but mostly they are handmade. And he has a real passion for Italian tarot and card making in the Italian tradition, with the folded over edges and so forth. In fact, that's mostly what I've seen from Marco in the past. His focus was always on like the illuminated decks, or like the Charles VI, the Budapest, the Rosenwald. He's always had those kind of interests. He's not a big fan of Tarot de Marseille, judging by what he's said in the past. He does like some, but he seems to be enjoying this little romance with Type 1 Tarot. So that's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to show you the Jean Payen. We're going to talk a bit about, what I like about it and so forth. But this is printed in Avignon, 1743, not to be confused with the Jean-Pierre Payen, which is also from Avignon, but from 1713. This one's printed by Yves Renaud. We'll probably look at them. The Guilaume Dubessett is a Type 1 from Leon, if I'm remembering correctly. And the first I heard about this was actually through Marco, long before he decided to print it. I didn't even know it existed, and one day we were talking about like Type 1s, and he sent me some pictures of the, I believe it's in the British Museum. Yes, the British Museum. And I learned all about the Dubessett. I had no idea. So thanks to Marco, and he's brought it to life. But also, and a lot of people probably don't know, he prints a Noblet. So we're going to start with Noblet first, because it's the deck I'm most familiar with, and it's the most well-known. Before I get into showing the cards, I just want to say Noblet, most people are going to know about Noblet because it's probably the most well-known of the historic tarots. It was reintroduced to the world by Jean-Claude Flournoy when he redid the deck in, I think, like 2007, and he wrote and blogged about it, about the history of the card makers and the mythology surrounding the magician and so forth. But he reintroduced it to the world in a big way. I think it was discovered in like the 80s sometimes, because in 1980 Michael Dummett published the Game of Tarot, and it wasn't mentioned there. But it was later mentioned sometime in the 80s by Kaplan. So it had come about probably sometime in the early to mid 1980s. And then Flournoy sort of did this whole kind of returning to the, pure original Tarot de Marseille. We kind of know that it's not the oldest tarot now, because for one, there are fragments that are much older than 1650. So Noblet was 1650 is the date that you often see. It was made in Paris. Tarot is likely starting to be printed in France around 1500. So it's was never the oldest tarot. It was, but it may have been the oldest that we knew about at one time. It no longer holds that title either. But even though it wasn't the oldest, it kind of became, romanticized a bit as the oldest and most purest tarot, whatever. So that's why so many people, even to this day, love the Noblet. And I never was a huge fan of it, actually, until the last few years. And now it's probably my most used Tarot de Marseille, mostly because of the size, but also I got used to just seeing the images. But this is my reader copy that I keep in my bag. It's a Fleur Noir. But yeah, so initially I only had the two. I got the Noblet by Fleur Noir, and then I got the Peterson. And Peterson's more like, I'm probably going to do a comparison, just show you. But it's more like a facsimile. And that's what Marco does. Marco is a facsimile guy. He really likes the original printed look of facsimiles. Artisan Tarot did a Noblet as well, which I have and I've showed previously on my channel. So you can check down below and find that. But for now, we're just going to look at the three. Marco has done a phenomenal job with his boxes recently. He's making these telescopic boxes that are very sturdy and really well made. And it's just amazing that he has the time to do it. They just look so professional, and it's all handmade. So, I mean, you're not going to get that anywhere else in terms of box quality. He's really good at making boxes. The card quality of his Noblet is really good. I mean, it's a handmade. It has a very rustic quality to it. He uses a sort of laid paper finish. The ink or the toner, whatever he used, I'm not sure what media he used to print, but it looks really good and really authentic with kind of a rustic quality to it. And that reminds me of the Peterson deck, which was sort of, this was my second Noblet, and I remember thinking, well, looks much more original, and it's because he basically doctored up some of the images in the Bibliothèque Nationale. And again, this is my first, which is Fleur Noir. And this is way different than these two, because it's not really historic. Again, he was doing it for tarot reading, and he was doing a nod to the original, but it's redrawn and more colorful. And this new print, this is a later print, more recent that I've gotten, and the colors look phenomenal. I have to say, they're much brighter, and they just have a different feel to them. But you can see, like, Peterson's is very sort of similar to Marco's. Now, when I first saw that Marco was printing this deck, I remember seeing a little tea being spilt and some accusations being made or allusions being made that Marco had ripped off Joseph Peterson, but I don't believe that to be the case. I find the only similarity between the two, in fact, they look way different. I mean, if you just look, they look way different. But that's sort of what you see in the original, the missing finger, which Fleur Noir sort of played up and mythologized a little bit. But both Peterson and Marco have changed or made repairs to what they see as block printing error. But it's not the same drawing. It's much different, you can see the differences in everything, So he may have drew inspiration from Peterson in terms of creating this card, but it may be the only similarity throughout the whole deck, and you can hardly call that plagiarism. I mean, I'm not an expert. It doesn't appear to be. We're talking about this small portion here. The rest is all original, and it looks to be different to me, you know, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he did borrow this. I don't know. Maybe he got permission. I don't know. But I know the rest of the deck is different. For instance, well, when we get there, I'm going to show you there are some swords cards missing from the pips in this deck. Cards 6 through 10. So we'll see that the cards are much different in the two decks. So, but I really love the John Noblet. I mean, it's a very unique deck. It's nice that it's small, you know, and very easy to use. But you can see Marcos has a very authentic print vibe going. You know, it looks very similar to, you know, what would have been, you know, with the very dark colors, which, you know, when you see these new bright colors, they didn't really exist back then. You know, they didn't have all ink was like made from real pigment. It was more archaic, the printing back then. You know, you didn't have the bright colors and so forth. But, you know, I mean, I like all three. I'm glad I own all three. They're just different, you know. But, you know, you can see that blue looks really, really pretty in the Fleur Noir. So it's interesting because that appears to be a bear to me in the Noblet. It's not a lion, really. It's hard to really tell, you know, when you look at the original, but it's probably a bear in the La Force. And then the Hangman or Le Pendu in this deck is just very unique. So it's a little different, but, you know, the look itself is very different. In Noblet also, you know, you see the word La Mort written as opposed to left blank. And a lot of times in the historic French tarots, they left card 13 just blank as death. You know, they didn't write out death. So, I mean, it's a very quirky and charming deck for a lot of reasons. I don't think that it's the oldest again, but, you know, it definitely is one of the older decks, and it's nice. I mean, it's nice to have a deck that we, from that period, that we, you know, we can talk about, and it helps us sort of piece together tarot history a little bit, you know. The full face of the moon, which is also a quality that is attributed to so-called type 1, but, you know. And then here we have the Le Monde, or the world, which is, you know, again, very type 1. The argument has always been that type 1 was the sort of the original, and then type 2 came about later as an improvement. We don't know that to be true, but, you know, it seems that way in a lot of cases, because all the earlier decks, including the most recent discovery by Theory to Paulus, the one that just auctioned off, I can't remember the name of it, I will put it down below. I haven't seen any type 2s from that period. So, and then here we have Le Fou. And now what I want to show you is, I don't know if I have them in order here. Let's see. Yeah, so the 6 through 10 of the swords. Now this is the missing cards. You see these two are very similar, the Peterson and the Fleur Noir. And it looks like Peterson may have even borrowed some inspiration, whereas Marco has used, he told me he used Jacques Vaville pips in their place, which is, you know, it's a pretty clever idea because they're so similar, different sizes, but very similar. Yeah, I mean, you know, you can see the differences. You know, it's not exactly plagiarized. It's hard to make that case, but, you know, anyway. I think just Marco's decision to include that second drawn Batelier kind of made it suspicious. But if you look at the deck, you know, the missing cards are all coming from a different source, and it's got a different coloration, and it's the only thing it has in common with the Peterson is that it's from the same copy in the Bibliothèque Nationale France, and I like both, honestly. I will say that Marco tends to make cards based on the original dimensions, so this is probably more along the lines of what was initially printed, you know, in terms of sizes. I don't know the details, but that's usually how Marco operates. So the Jean-Claude Fleury deck is still available. I'm not sure about the Peterson deck, but I'll leave a link below if it is. It was as of recently. They're all good in their own right. And I have to say that Marco seems to be stepping up his card-making game a little bit, particularly with the boxes. I mean, they're just phenomenal. So, okay, and then the next deck we're going to look at is the Guilaume Dubessett, which I actually first learned about from Marco. I never knew that this deck existed. One day we were talking, and he sent me pictures of the Dubessett. And I was like, wow, it's really quirky, because I was really obsessed with, you know, tarot from Leon, because I was reading a lot of, well, I just read that essay by Thierry de Paulus called, you know, Facts and Fallacies, Tarot de Marseille, and I was really interested in type 1 tarot, and then that's when I started printing the Noblet and so forth, but... so anyway, this is the Marco Benedetti version of the Dubessett, and then on the right I have a deck printed by Florent Giraud, who is a French card maker. He's been making some you know, quote-unquote handmade decks in Aix-en-Provence. I don't know the extent of his card making methods. I know more from Marco, just based on conversations. But again, same kind of telescopic box in Marco's. And I figured I just wanted to show both. I don't typically start off with the full, but it just so happens that it was on top. So I actually really love a lot of the things about this deck. It's not my favorite deck because it's a bit grotesque. It's not the prettiest deck, but there are certain features of it that I really like. For instance, the winged helmet, or what appears to be a winged helmet, might not be, but they look like wings, which kind of, you know, makes me think of Hermes Mercury, you know, in the Fool, and that's really cool, you know. And there's just a lot of quirky little things. I also like the colors that were used in this. It's just different, the gold and brown. Okay, so one thing which I didn't mention about the Dubessett is that it was actually restored by Shell David, my friend. So both of these guys are really friends of mine, and both have been on my channel. I've worked with Shell, collaborated with him myself, my card making projects, and Sheldon is just one of my favorite people in tarot. He's a genuinely kind individual, and he's generous and just great and a pleasure to be around. He's at East Tarot here on YouTube, and he also has a website and an Instagram. I'll link that below. You can check him out. But I was happy to see this collaboration between Marco and Sheldon. And so, you know, in that sense, I would have gotten this deck anyway. You know, it wasn't just to review it compared to this. Now, I just had ordered this through a friend already before I got Marco's. So Marco had announced later that he was making it and collaborating with Shell. But I'm happy to have both. I like both in their own rights. I would say that Florent's deck is a little thinner. Doesn't appear to be a double ply card build, although I could be wrong about that. I don't know. Whereas Marco's is, you know, it's pasted and bonded together. I'm not sure how either were printed, whether they used real ink or, you know, dry media. I'm not sure. But you can see the card different. The size is smaller in Marco's because, again, he always likes to make the cards the original size. whereas Florence are a bit bigger. But they both look great. Florence is probably a little bit more cleaned up. Sheldon probably decided to keep all those ghost lines and things in there, whereas Florent decided that he was going to, you know, get rid of them. But almost identical, even the color, the tones, both are done really well and very similar. But yeah, it's not the prettiest, most exciting deck, but there are some things I really like about this deck, which I'll print out. Like, for instance, the court cards are cool. The ghost lines, but it just looks like it doesn't look like a deck that would have been super popular in its day. It was probably maybe a throwaway deck or something, but the brown faces were always interesting, and that was the thing, because I remember people, one of the big criticisms of Tarot de Marseille was, you know, they're all white faces, there are no brown faces, and I'm like, well, there are plenty of historic decks that actually have a variety of skin colors in them. You know, and this was one of them. You know, some brown faces, not the prettiest job done, but you can clearly see, I mean, those are darker complected individuals, you know. So not sure what NR stands for in the nameplate. I hadn't really researched this too much, but if you have an idea of where that is, please leave it below, and as well as any other information would be helpful. Yeah, cool hermit, you know. Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of it's blurry. I mean, that looks like it was probably a cool looking hangman, but it's so hard to see, to make anything out. And then they do have Lamort, which is, well, it's like La, the number 13, then Morse, which is something I've never seen before. And, you know, classic type 1 devil. And tower as well. And the star card is really pretty in this deck. It's one of the prettiest cards in the deck, I think. But the star card's always pretty, you know. It's hard to kind of, like, I've never seen Tarot de Marseille star card I didn't like. And the moon, the full face of the moon, of course. And our sun card. You know, it's a cool deck. I'm happy to have it. It's not my favorite, but it was an interesting deck. Something different, you know. And yeah, so I'm going to just go through the rest of Marco's deck, you know, which is because it's pretty similar to Florent's deck as well. But the coins are really cool. I like how they're decorated. They're somewhat fancy, probably ripped off from another deck or plagiarized. You know, some of them are, these are probably missing cards that are different. I'm not sure where the 4 coins, I don't know which cards were missing. There's our 2 of coins. I guess we did a full walkthrough, we could see the differences, but you know, I like this deck for a lot of reasons. Primarily, I just like the core cards. Like, for instance, the Queen of Swords. It doesn't look like it was done by the same artist. Like, it looks like almost like it's mixed even. You know, it's a different style between the 2 core cards. Do you know what I mean? It looks like a different engraving style. Like they've combined different blocks or something, or maybe they were originally missing. I don't know the story behind it, but it's kind of cool and quirky. But yeah, you see that a lot in this deck. Yeah, just some of the core cards just don't seem to, you know, like, they don't all fit in. Like, this looks more traditional. These look more like, almost like Claude Burdell or something, you know? Like, it's hard to really explain, but yeah, anyway. So, that's still available. I'm going to leave Marco's information below, as well as Florent's, you know, information if you want either of these decks. I like both, honestly. You know, they're both cool. I'm a little more partial to Marco's because it's created by 2 of my friends, and you know, I like what they did. But I don't know the details about what's missing. I will say Florence slides really well because he puts soap on the cards. So I don't know the details of how he makes his cards, but I do know that he does a soap finish, which is pretty impressive and cool. Last but not least, we're going to look at the Jean Payen, which, you know, I only have the Jean-Pierre Payen from 1713, which was, you know, one of the early Avignon decks. It's the only deck, a Payen deck, that I have. I don't have anything similar to this. I forget what it was and why I wanted it. I think I was reading about Avignon and the card making that was there and so forth, and I wanted to get a copy of it. The only place you could get a copy of it at the time was Agnes from Cartogram, and it was very expensive, and I didn't want to invest that kind of money in like a, you know, super luxurious handmade deck from Agnes. I just, not for the Payen. And then I saw that Marco had announced that he was printing it, and I believe Florent Giraud also prints it as well. So, but I will say that Marco's deck, his boxes, I mean, are phenomenal. Like, look at that. Is, you know, it's a magnetic closure. You have this whole thing here signed by Marco. And it's really cool, you know. I don't see that too often. And it's wooden, you know. Well, this is similar to Noblet in terms of Marco's quality, the paper. It's got that laid finish. He's using laid paper. And these backs, which I've seen in other places. But I can't remember exactly where I saw it first, but it's a common back in TDM. Okay, so this is the Jean Payen on the right. This is the Pierre Payen, the earlier version. You can see, I mean, it's inspired by the same type. And actually, for some reason, I was thinking the Jean-Pierre Payen was a type 2 in my mind for some reason. But I don't know why I thought that had like a little bit of a brain fart there. But yeah, you can see this different, you know, but inspired probably by the same tradition, you know, same canon, as they say. So there's the Pepessa. You know, very, very cool type 1 deck. Very important for, you know, early Tarot Marseille history and so forth. And I really like what Marco's doing with the printing. I mean, it looks phenomenal. It really does. You know, it's a very important deck. I don't know why neither deck has initials in the engraver. But, yeah, just happy to have this. Again, it's available through Marco. I'm going to leave all his information below. Just a very cool historic type 1, similar to Noblet, or similar to Dodal, rather, and to Dubessett, you know. So, but anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'll be happy to hear from you. And until next time, everybody, love and peace. Bye-bye.